One of the intersections the Lock, Stock, and Barrel podcast focuses on is that of sustainability, innovation, and cutting edge tech that's shaping our future at an exponential speed. Today, joining us to unload a barrel of brilliance for our expert conversation series called the Lock, Stock, and Barrel Experts Lab is Nick Valenzia. We'll talk about the practical ways to turn this catch all phrase of sustainability from being just an idea into a craft, into a doing word with the right skills and the right mindset. I'm chaani.srivastava, and you're tuned into the Lock, Stock, and Barrel podcast. Let's dive right in. My guest today, as I mentioned in the beginning, is Nick Valenzia, co-founder of Leafr, a sustainability job board redefining access to green skills. The truth is, sustainability isn't just about what corporations and policymakers do at the macro level. Sustainability is predominantly about the smaller players, the startups, the entrepreneurs, all of the small and medium sized enterprises, and all businesses who have the potential to drive meaningful change, but often lack the tools, resources, or skills to do so efficiently. And that's exactly what we are here to talk about today: how to make sustainability more actionable, more tangible, and more within reach of such enterprises. How do we bridge the skills gap? How do we ensure that businesses of all sizes can integrate sustainability into their very DNA, not as an afterthought, but as a core strategy? To help us unpack this, I am joined by Nick, who works at the forefront of this challenge, especially with his latest brainchild, Leafr, which he co-founded in 2022. Leafr as a platform ensures that sustainability expertise isn't just for big corporations, but accessible to all businesses looking to make a positive impact. Without much ado now, let's get our conversation going. Hi, Nick. Thank you for sparing your time and joining us today on the Lock, Stock, and Barrel podcast. You've built such an impressive career, from working in Accenture to your education at the business school at the University of Oxford, where you started the first climate angel investing syndicate, and now to co-founding Leafr. Could you talk a little bit about your background and what was it initially that sparked your passion in this field?
Yeah, thank you for having me, firstly. I think there's probably the long form and the short form one. The long form, my family are Maltese originally, so a small island, which has seen a lot of marine environmental degradation.
Yeah.
And that, from an emotional perspective, that gets you pretty interested in this stuff. And then from a more professional standpoint, I went to Accenture and I wound up in their kind of impact and sustainability arm. And I was always one step removed from this stuff. But, getting exposure to these projects as a consultant, and I just wanted to do more of it, and worked a bit in health initially, and then left Accenture and wanted to do more within sustainability, having had a small taste and having, really seen how issues within things like global health, so access to childhood nutrition or agricultural cycles, they all kind of tie back to the same thing, which is climate. And started working more on those projects, then started working outside of Accenture with climate tech startups, and then started a business which didn't really go anywhere and wanted to figure out why. So I went to business school to try and learn how, and I picked a business school that had a very, very, very heavy climate sustainability focus, which is why I did a lot more of my kind of formal academic training, and then founded Leafr off the back of that.
Wow, that's amazing. Can you talk a little bit about the business that didn't work? Because those are the talking points, and that is where all the lessons come from, right?
For real, yeah. So it was called Superpowers, and it was actually about the issue of loneliness amongst elderly people.
Oh, wow.
I mean, I've started 4 in total, but this is, I think, one that went a bit further than some of the others. I mean, we've all had family members who are, a bit older and potentially bereaved and lonely, and I had an experience of that within my own family, and wanted to create just a bit of a support network that involved people in that situation speaking to others who are the same age as them.
Wow.
And the reason, COVID hit and loneliness became a huge issue.
Correct.
And kind of caught a minor zeitgeist there. But then the reason why I had to pare it down is because I was doing it on my own as a solo founder. I realized that I don't think I was equipped with the right kinds of skills to scale a business like that, and also keep things like safeguarding. We never had an issue with things like scammers, but they are a massive issue with any network where people are elderly.
Wow.
So I just, I didn't want that kind of, I don't think I was ready for that kind of responsibility. So I wanted to figure out how to do this properly. I was interested in things like network effects, really interested in network effects. And then I went to business school and would ask about this in every class and ask about these things. And none of the professors knew. But in the meantime, I was moving more into climate. So there we are.
Wow, but it's a phenomenal idea. I hope that at some point in the future, you do materialize this in one way or the other, because I can't think of a more noble and better use of one's network and collaboration. I feel like there's such opportunity in this space as well, that I really hope that, you can fructify this idea in one way or the other.
Yeah, it's a tricky one. I think you have a lot of fondness for your early ideas as well. It's, I mean, again, we look forwards and we look at what we're working on now, and that takes up the 99% of my headspace,
bandwidth. I completely get it. So, of course, and today we're all about Leafr and all about your journey with it and how you've grown with it. I often find myself, Nick, having conversations with people where one is trying to define the term climate expertise in one way or the other, because there are no set parameters in place in the industry for that type of skilled professional, right? So since you deal with an array of climate experts on a daily basis, in your view, what would truly define someone as a climate expert?
Yeah, it's such a good question. And we and businesses really grapple with this, because I agree with you, there's no one set term. What I see and what is helpful to me, and coming from Leafr's standpoint, is see things like climate or sustainability as umbrella terms for a wider set of skills, in the same way that AI is an umbrella term fundamentally for a wider set of technologies.
Correct.
And so, for example, that means things like biodiversity, it means things like water access, it means things like renewable energy.
Correct.
The way that we've approached that in Leafr, because we have to offer a broad set of skills and services, is we have a really, really comprehensive mapping of the changing landscape of all of those different skills, like the ones I just mentioned. And then we have proof points within each one of those of what is the proof point for you to say that you're a biodiversity expert, especially relevant to the UK context and UK regulation. And then, since we have those proof points, it's saying, right, how do you test those proof points? And myself, my co-founder, and people on Leafr, we facilitate the experts. We're not the experts. So we use the people on Leafr to help vet as well. So we've got, for example, one of the people who helped write the UK legislation on biodiversity. And using people like that to vet, and it means that we can have a bit of a threshold that we're constantly developing. So again, I think it's definitely catch-all. It's not always helpful. But I see it as it's a broader kind of goal. And the way that we define the goal of becoming sustainable is understand and reduce your impact on the environment.
Correct.
While achieving your business goals.
Correct.
Because we work with small businesses and they care about keeping their staff paid and keeping the business running. And for them, we say, not only it's about, setting a goal about, let's say, plastics. But it's about actually understanding where your impacts lie. Because for many people, it isn't going to be something like recycling. It's going to be actually energy usage or something else. So understand, set the goals, minimize it, and keep your business healthy.
Yeah, that's very well said. I also know many people, Nick, with traditional degrees who are passionate about sustainability, but don't really know what to do. And many individuals with traditional academic backgrounds are deeply passionate about their causes, yet they often feel unsure about how to transition into a field or into a specific role that they would want to pursue for the long run. So, what, in your opinion, are some unconventional career paths or emerging opportunities within the sustainability sector that these individuals might not have considered before? And how can they leverage their existing skills and their traditional degrees to make a meaningful impact?
Yeah, well, you say traditional. I mean, we have ex-farmers on Leafr.
Oh, wow.
And I don't think that you can get more traditional than having been a farmer. I think that's the original career. Maybe a hunter. Don't know if we have any hunters on Leafr. But I don't know, I think we're very lucky that we live in a world where you have access to the world's knowledge right in front of you. So I think the opportunities for personal growth and personal certification are kind of boundless. And since climate is such a young space, no one 10 years ago, or very few people 10 years ago, were working on things like carbon removal or even things like carbon accounting. That was confined to a very small subset of scientists until about 5 to 8 years ago. So it's a new field, so I wouldn't worry too much about not having got a degree in things like sustainability. And I think, if you have strategy skills or finance skills or legal skills, there are so many opportunities within the space, because I always end up saying, like, the space needs accountants, it needs lawyers, because all that changed is the mission, not the kind of the process for getting there. So I really wouldn't worry too much about that.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. I mean, I'm a lawyer and a strategist, and I know that the space needs trained professionals in other interdisciplinary areas that can be of great use here. And of course, as I've mentioned this to you before, I unabashedly promote Leafr, and I feel like it's a great platform with great potential. But what would you say Leafr's differentiator is? As in, how do you ensure that clients are truly implementing sustainable solutions and not just greenwashing? Because in my sphere of work, I've seen that a lot of times clients just end up greenwashing.
I mean, it depends. Greenwashing is very relevant when we're talking about things like comms and marketing. And it's less relevant for other projects where you're talking about doing life cycle assessments or setting strategies. So on the greenwashing point, I mean, we use the UK's ASA framework on greenwashing to vet projects. But I would really say our job as a platform is to facilitate the best possible network of consultants and skills and resources for companies. We have to trust the consultants that they are doing that, and that they're kind of embodying our mission and our values, but they're the ones responsible for doing the work. It's really like we're there for clients. We can walk them through. I'm curious about clients who might pay a fair amount of money for a consultant just to greenwash. From what I've seen, a lot of greenwashing tends to come from either internally in companies or from PR agencies. And we're not a PR agency. And again, we have a front end vetting for projects, because that's our promise to the consultants that we would try and filter as far as possible. So it hasn't happened yet. But again, I just tie it back to, like, it's on us to make sure that we vet not only the consultants, that they're the best, that they have these kinds of values, but the projects as well.
Yeah, you're right. And I've seen that Leafr has about 2 to 3 month wait period for everyone, so that they can vet everything properly according to the projects. And I feel like that's such a crucial thing. And I feel like that's also a differentiator for Leafr in one way or the other. But this kind of sustainability consultancy, is that just strictly related to technical knowledge, or is there more to it? I ask this because in my experience as a strategist, I've seen that communication, collaborating with different verticals in a business, and perhaps, in my opinion, even a little bit of resilience in a professional plays a really key role in the whole process. Do you think that is also something that you consider?
Yeah, in terms of the kind of skills you would buy, right? No, there's 100%. There's everything from soup to nuts on Leafr. I think we've had very technical ones, so things like biodiversity calculations or carbon accounting. We've had comms and copywriting, but then we also have the more advisory or kind of strategic roles as well. The thing for us is, well, there are many, many routes and many, many processes that will allow a business to hit sustainability goals. It isn't just, as you say, technically measuring emissions. It's setting strategies to reduce them. It's change management. It's telling your story, you know. And then it's about well, what niche do you sell that broad suite to, basically?
Yeah. What is something that has surprised you as well in this field? Is a farmer's skill set the most unique one on your platform, or is it something even more interesting than that?
The farmers one is pretty unique.
Yeah.
And as someone who has personally also worked on sustainable aviation fuel projects that involve farming, I think that it's just an incredible mindset to have. But I do also like hesitate to point out one, because I think even the people who've got more kind of quote unquote traditional roots into the space, what actually matters is not, where you've come from, but it's like the kinds of work that they're doing. Some of our best consultants have been people who have had really traditional careers, but they just happen to be fantastic individuals, and they're just working on the front line and just doing incredible things. So
fair enough.
The farmer's one is cool.
He's also it's pretty cool.
His profile picture is very much, I am a farmer. Yeah.
It's really great. I also know that in terms of industries, I know that you're really passionate about energy transition, as we've talked about this before. What are some of the most exciting advancements in the field that you're most bullish on? Let's talk about 2025, and let's say like for the next 5 years or something.
There's a live debate on at the moment, which I, as a kind of concerned citizen about this stuff, I'm very interested in, about energy mixes and future energy sources. I think the one that excites me, and again, this conversation has come up repeatedly recently, is nuclear energy, and I hope the nuclear renaissance. Since essentially Chernobyl, there's a real slowdown in the development of nuclear power plants, and that again, it's been extensively studied. That slowdown caused potentially millions of deaths due to coal pollution, because coal takes up the slack when you don't have nuclear or gas. And you have these essentially huge demonstration projects, which are country size. So, for example, in Germany or in Australia, where they've tried to sprint headlong into renewables with the best of intention, just because of the intermittent nature of renewables, the sun doesn't always shine, the wind doesn't always blow. They have to pick up the slack somehow, and unfortunately, they are now locked into gas and in Germany's case, heavily into coal as well, which means that not only is their grid more expensive, but it's also more dirty. And I'm really excited about the fact that there is a potential nuclear renaissance coming, which has been driven not, I hope, just by physics, but also by cases like France, where your average person on the street in France pays far less for their energy, and their grid is almost 10 times cheaper than Germany's. 10 times more clean than Germany.
Oh yeah.
And they're one of the largest energy exporters in the world, and they make billions from that. So you look at France and that's all. You look at something like Canada, and they're both cases of countries that have got nuclear right. Again, same with South Korea. I think the criticism that is, I think, in my opinion, unfairly leveled at nuclear is that it's expensive. And I think we have made it so. Essentially, the level of regulation that you need to build, for example, the Sizewell C or Hinkley Point power plants in the UK is, it's tens of thousands of pages of documentation, years of approval. And I think we can do that far more cheaply. They do it 6 times cheaper in South Korea than we do, and they're just the same. What's exciting for me is hopefully a smarter way to approach regulation, but also there's things like small modular reactors, which are maybe 7 to 10 years away.
Yeah.
But they're driven by this massive need to power these new AI data centers. And my big hope for them is necessity being the mother of invention. Those data centers are going to speed up the development of SMRs, cheap, safe, free, or almost free energy once it's running. So that's the thing that excites me. There's still a lot of debate to be had. Germans.
Of course, but it's a great thought, and I completely am with you on this. I'm a big tech optimist, and I believe in the Tech for Good movement. I think it has great potential, and I would love to know your thoughts more about applying cutting edge tech in this sphere of work. I really feel like that can be hugely beneficial, but I also think that there is a massive lack of awareness when it comes to this.
Yeah.
Of course, coupled with geopolitical tensions and questions about stabilizing one's economy before you can strategize for something like this. Again, it comes down to the lack of expertise in the field as well. So in that sense, where do you see the biggest roadblocks would be?
Yeah, I think that's the expertise point, which I'll come to. I think the thing that worries me is actually the political path function that a lot of these countries are going down. So I don't want to pick on Germany too much. So the example of the UK, for me, a lot of these things comes down to there's major costs associated with the energy bill hitting your bank account every month with things like renewables. Unfortunately, like I don't want that to be the case, but it simply is. And countries have, they frequently, when people's bills go up, there's often populist uprisings. People vote with their feet. And I think the thing that worries me is, again, as we've seen in regions of Germany, as we've seen in the US, and potentially we might see in the UK in the next 5 years, is the voting in a far-right populist parties who are they're not as interested in a clean energy transition. That's what worries me. And I think that is the thing that we need to be extremely careful of when we talk about things like an energy transition. Then the other one, and that's maybe the kind of political sphere, moving to the how you actually do it. I bang on about the skills gap all the time. I don't think it's talked about enough. We just kind of expect a transition to happen, but I read a MSc and PwC study recently, which is potentially a skills gap in the UK alone relating to 500,000 workers. And it equates to 30 million tons of emissions, just in terms of the worker gap that is needed, equivalent to about the size of New Zealand, 30 million tons. And I think it's like the elephant in the room, massively, about things like not even energy, but just any other aspects, again, plastics, water. And it's just because we're doing all of this stuff for the first time. We don't know how to do it. And that is the reason why Leafr exists, I think, is to try and spread talent more equitably and more impactfully across these companies. But I think it's I would say this running Leafr, but I don't think it's spoken about enough.
Yeah, you're right in saying that. What you just said really hit home for me, because in my work advising sustainable fashion brands, I see this tension between individual action and the need for a big and loud systemic change all the time. Consumers are told to shop better, buy less, choose ethical brands. But behind the scenes, businesses face huge barriers. There are supply chain issues, cost pressures, and a massive lack of policy support. It's a constant push and pull between what individuals can do and what needs to change at an industry level. So, looking at the bigger picture, should we push for change as individuals, in your opinion, through our choices, through activism and communities? Or is it more important, at least for now, that we shift the dynamic, because the real power lies in embedding sustainability inside big businesses and governments, where they can at least drive a bigger and a more powerful impact on a larger scale?
It's definitely the latter. The individual actions one is it's a bit of a kind of moral quandary, I think, because you don't want to be a hypocrite, and I think if you work in this space, there's a lot of pressure on things like eating meat and flying and etc.
Yeah.
On the other hand, what is it like the biggest? I'm gonna get this figure slightly wrong, but it's something like the biggest 100 companies in terms of emitters are 70% of all emissions.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you want to move the dial, look no further. You know? And again, with governments, most of the largest fossil fuel companies in the world are state owned. You've got the Azerbaijani one, the Saudi Aramco. So I'm 100% not saying people shouldn't do this, because I think there's issues of things like just looking after your local community and your local environment with things like litter. That's not really a climate issue. That's more of a community issue. So I'm definitely do that, definitely recycle. But I think if you really want to have an impact, I always say go and work at a company like Shell, or go and work within the government. And I know loads of people who are doing that and are having an amazing impact. It's seen as maybe like taking the devil's dollar in a way, but that is fundamentally where you're going to have the biggest impact.
I completely agree with you. I usually call it infiltration. I say that we need to infiltrate these tables and get inside these C-suites so that we can be a part of the decision-making process, so we can have our say at the right places. But in no way do I undermine individual action, right? But I get a lot of flack for it, for saying that we need government action way more than individual action. And then, of course, it puts so much pressure. But I'm so glad you said that.
I mean, things like carbon pricing, just like that, you know, it's like, well, I mean, the UK is, it's a fantastic success story in terms of making their grid greener. And it's, you know, I think a lot of that does boil down to the fact that we've introduced a really, really good carbon price, you know, and we're trying to price in these externalities. So I think I can't remember the exact figure, 18 potentially per ton, £18 per ton, but we turned off our last coal plant last year. So I think that's where government's like, that's really what tips the balance. You know?
Yeah. You're right. But on a lighter note, since we are talking about individual action, what's the one sustainable habit that you've recently adopted that you're particularly proud of and would recommend it to others as well?
I mean, can I cheat and pick one that isn't recent, but I just like,
sure.
I think cycling around, like cycling to work, I just think even compared to things like taking trains, which are very good in of themselves, I just think it's like a fantastic lifestyle thing to do. It doesn't mean, you know, I live in London and it means you're not kind of stuck underground on a tube with hundreds of other people who also don't want to be there. So it's a nice way to start your day. The big ones and the ones that I teach some classes to small businesses occasionally, and there's kind of this emotional reaction of like, you know, climate activists are coming for us and telling us that we can't eat meat anymore. And I actually think the framing is like, no, I think you should continue eating meat. I think it has a very central cultural place in many people's diets, but maybe just consider reducing the amount of beef you eat. You can still have the occasional steak. I think we shouldn't be trying to ban it. But, you know, if you swap from, you know, I don't know, 10 steaks a month to 80% of your beef related emissions gone, which is a huge amount of your emissions anyway. And you can still have those 2 steaks and feel good about yourself. So I think it's more about that, I would say. And definitely something that I've tried to do.
Wow, that's amazing. I mean, I like both of these things and both of them are very impactful. I feel like these can be highly recommended. Okay, another fun question as we wrap up. If you could have one superpower to combat climate change, what would it be and why?
Oh,
somebody asked me this, so yeah.
You know, I'm always very inspired by is like Jacques Cousteau, the French submariner, who he is an amazing person. He kind of filmed the first underground videos of marine life well before David Attenborough or any other wildlife documentaries, and just kind of took these kind of submersibles down there. And I think the ability to it's really hard to film in those environments even today. I think the ability to film marine environments, or just, you know, if it's a superpower, to kind of like hold your breath underwater and to be able to go down there and even like and just bring what is going on with things like bottom trawling and just make it a lot more visible. Because again, if anyone's listening to this, I encourage you to go on YouTube videos of bottom trawling and you'll see what happens. I think that is amazing. So that is one issue that is responsible for huge amounts of emissions and just isn't talked about enough. And also, it'd just be cool to go and, you know, swim with the fish.
Yeah, it'd be so cool. I love that idea. We're going to link that in the description box. That's going to be really cool. So while we're talking about YouTube videos, why don't you tell us about your digital diet? What are you watching? What are you listening to? I know you're heavily into music, so we're not going to let you go before you give the top music that we need to hear this year.
Yesterday I listened to this British London-based jazz band called Ezra Collective. I think it's called Dance No One's Watching, and I hadn't caught it yet. It's really good. And they are awesome. I've seen them live a few times. Encourage people to check that out.
Cool.
And then in terms of watching, I don't get loads of opportunities to watch things at the moment, so I probably couldn't tell you any of those. My partner and I have been failing to watch Industry.
Oh, God. Okay.
Which taken us about 4 months to watch one season.
Oh,
so,
wow. Okay.
I am enjoying it. I'm on about an episode every 3 weeks at the moment.
Okay. And are you a reader? Are you reading anything?
Yeah, much more so.
Okay. So anything that you can recommend would be great.
Yeah, maybe the last amazing book on climate that I read was one called The Overstory, which is just incredible. It's just an incredible novel, I think, whether you care about the climate space or not. I found it so inspiring. And there was another one called The Venomous Lumpsucker, which a friend recommended, which was also great.
Is it good?
Kind of focus novels, but again, and then maybe more from a business standpoint, I kind of take or leave business books, but someone gave me this book called, an investor gave me this book called How to Be a Great CEO, which literally means that I can't read it in public because it's not a good look. But I've actually found really, really useful and very, very practical.
Okay, that's great. I'm going to pick that up. That sounds promising. So, but thank you. Thank you for sharing that with us. Lastly, what gives you hope for the future of our planet, Nick?
Oh, no, I'm very long on human intelligence and human kind of fortitude and our ability to solve these problems. Like, this isn't the first climate crisis in history. I mean, there's been many, and humans are still here. So I'm fundamentally really hopeful. Like, I think the things I mentioned about nuclear energy give me huge amounts of hope. The pace to which the Overton window has shifted from even 10 years ago, the conversations we're having. So I just think we'll try all the bad ideas, then we'll only be left with good ones.
With the good ones. Oh, what a way to close this. Finally, do you want to tell us a little bit more about the road ahead for you? Any exciting projects lined up for this year? What should we look out for? Any vision for upgrading Leafr?
Yeah, so we finished a funding round.
Congratulations on that.
Thank you. I don't think we've officially announced it yet, so maybe we can announce it here.
Yay!
And we finished that. We've wrapped that up. We are embarking for the first quarter of the year just on a big new platform rebuild, which means that we're going to not only bring the whole user journey onto the platform, but allow us to do things like have more partnerships. That's an amazing big project. And then for us, it's just about getting more growth, more projects on there, getting more work for our consultants, basically.
Sounds really cool. Well, thank you for having us in your living room and sparing your time this morning. It's been amazing. It's been amazing. Thank you for this conversation, Nick, and thank you for coming to the Lock, Stock and Barrel podcast. I hope I get to see you soon.
Thank you for doing what you do.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Today, we've explored the pivotal role of sustainable skills with Nick, learning that empowering businesses of all sizes with the right knowledge and tools is essential to unlocking a green future for all of us. From bridging the skills gap to navigating the complexities of policy and technology, we've also uncovered both the challenges and opportunities before us. Sustainability is no longer just a concept. It's a legitimate call to action. Whether you're a business owner integrating sustainability into your operations or an individual committed to change, the power to shape the future lies within our collective efforts. As we move forward, I'm going to remind you of the words of T.S. Eliot. Eliot said, "Only those who will risk going too far can possibly find out how far one can go." The path to sustainability requires bold steps, and with each action, we get closer to a future we can all be proud of. Don't forget to take a look at the show notes below to go through the resources that went into building this episode for you. And if you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to subscribe, like, and share it with someone who you think will benefit from this conversation. You will find all the links to this podcast in the description box below as usual. Thank you for tuning in this time. Until next time, stay curious and stay engaged.